My name is Rick Reinierson. I'm a former drone pilot. I once refused a mission because it violated the Constitution of the United States. I would like to now speak with you about Brandon Bryant.
I hope you'll all back me in my decision to bring Brandon on the stage. Well, it was very important for me to tell the human stories from both sides of the drones.
Do you think that this national conversation that seems to be trying to get started right now, do you think it's going to make a difference?
It should. Hopefully it should. Maybe that since I'm the first person to talk, maybe others will come out and talk. That would be nice.
The views expressed here are personal and do not represent the Air Force, the Department of Defense, or the United States government. Believe that. I was once stationed at the same base as Brandon, and at the same time, I did not know him professionally or personally. When he left the service, I did get to know him for several years on social media. I paid attention to his media contributions. Initially, I thought he may add value to the discussion. I have since changed my mind.
The last day, right before I left, one of the lieutenants that I always hung around with, she was like, "Hey, do you want your statistics, piece of paper with your statistics on it?" And I was like, I didn't even know what it was. So I was like, okay, sure, just.
And one of the lieutenants I was friends with, she was like, "Hey, do you want your statistics sheet?" And I was like, well, sure, why not? Like, a record of my stuff. And I known this thing existed because people use this for promotional purposes.
It is like, I guess it's like a scorecard or whatever you want to call it. I don't know. It was just one of those things that I thought was the stupid, why'd they give it to me? Because all it did was make me feel terrible about, like, it made me question myself, it made me question my integrity.
I've only been contacted by the United States government twice. Well, technically once. First was by the FBI, and they called me up and they said, "Mr. Bryant, this is the FBI, you're not in trouble." So I took that as kind of a good sign until they told me that I was on the ISIS kill list. That was the second time that they'd approached me officially, actually. The first time I was in Seattle getting health care at the VA, and they were like, "Mr. Bryant, this is the FBI, you're not in trouble." And then they kept told me that I was on the ISIS kill list and that I should stop my social media. And they're like, "No, Mr. Bryant, you are now on the ISIS kill list, and we want to send two agents to your location. Can you tell us where you're at?" And I was like,
the FBI was saying that you were on an ISIS kill list.
Yes, they're telling me that I was on an ISIS kill list.
The strange thing is I've never really gotten an official response from the United States government. In fact, the only time I've ever talked to the government was when the FBI called me about 3 weeks ago and told me that I wasn't in trouble, but someone was coming after me and they wanted to warn me. So that was like the only time. And it wasn't Muslim. It was a conservative right-wing Christian group. Unfortunately, Christian Patriots.
This 3-part documentary will show Brandon's own words supporting my position, but I will now make that position clear. Brandon Bryant is a shameless fraud and an unabashed liar. He lied to the American people when he was in uniform and swore to defend the Constitution, and he lies to them now in hopes of defrauding them further through a disability paycheck from the Veterans Administration. And he lies to the international public, and in so doing, degrades a very important discussion while destroying the credibility of lawyers, journalists, and activists who inexplicably provide him a medium for his deception. Brandon Bryant will say anything. Speaking out against unlawful government action is the stuff of true patriotism. But Brandon Bryant is no patriot. While in the service, Brandon never refused a single mission or order, and he never resigned. He did, however, use weapons of warfare against the citizens of America. He committed treason, as defined in Article 3 of the Constitution, by making war on the United States. Brandon Bryant is a traitor. But don't take my word for it. Brandon will support my assertions himself with his very own words. In Part 1, Brandon discusses his military service, why he completed his contract and did not re-enlist, how the military affected him, to include claims of physical and mental injury, and he claims that he is disabled, jobless, and homeless, despite living with his mother and receiving a government housing allowance of more than $1,000 a month. In Part 2, we examine Brandon's claims about his purpose post-military, where he seeks to bring accountability to his country and to those he worked with in the military by speaking out on a world stage. We examine Brandon's claims of persecution, why he did not object during his military service as others he knew had done, and we listen to Brandon label himself a war criminal in need of judgment, while at the very same time arguing that he should not be tried in a court of law. In Part 3, we take a fascinating look at Brandon's intense identification with fantasy novels and young adult fictional depictions of heroes and villains. Themes presented include resurrection, God comparisons, and the messianic desire to be a savior of people. We witness Brandon's internalization of such themes as he repeatedly plagiarizes words from fictional fantasy heroes and delivers them in speeches to the public. Finally, we glimpse Brandon's utility to Tonya Hessen-Shea, a foreign activist documentarian who literally made Brandon Bryant her poster child. As I said, don't take my word for it. Brandon himself will support my claims. His story begins while he is a high school student.
America strikes back. Afghanistan is pounded with bombs and missiles from the air and sea.
We are supported by the collective will of the world.
Homeland Security has stepped up to protect against retaliation, and bin Laden himself sends a videotaped threat to the American people.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
Right. On the other hand, it's the United States Air Force. You had to know that that at some point you might get to a point where you're dropping bombs on people.
I really never thought about it. I knew that I could be in a position where I would need to use maybe weapons if I was going to be forward deployed, like rifles or pistols or whatever. And that I didn't have an issue with because it was, direct fight for one's survival in one's life. It was. Plus, I believed in the system at that time. I believed in what we were doing, and I didn't really have any education on what else was going on. And so it didn't really cross my mind that I would be dropping bombs from 10,000 miles away onto people.
When did you join the Air Force, and what were you expecting?
I joined the Air Force in July 5th, 2005.
July 4th, 2005, I joined the United States military. We were consistently told when I was going through training that our job was to kill people and break things. And they put us in a theater no bigger than this. And they showed a montage video of drone strikes. Ba, 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 boom, 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 boom. Played to heavy metal music. And at the end of the video, a sergeant came down the center, and he stood in front of us, and he said, "Your job is to kill people and break things." And I thought to myself, this isn't why I joined. I joined for very patriotic reasons, to get my education. It's not free in America. And to impress a pretty girl.
Former drone pilot, what he thinks of this assessment. Joining us in the now is ex-Air Force pilot and drone operator Brendan Bryant. Brendan, thank you so much for joining us. You spent 6 years, as far as I understand, operating from a dark container. This is something that, how you describe it. How do you feel? I hope you heard our previous guest. He was from NoDrones.com, calling drone operators essentially murderers.
Well, I just want to clarify first that I'm not a pilot. Was a sensor operator. But I mean, essentially, he's not lying. As far as I can tell, the shots that I took, we didn't even really know who we were firing at.
You're basically saying that drone operators are not pilots. Am I correct?
No, there is a pilot, but there's two people that fly these things, and one is a pilot and one is not, and I was the not.
So what does the not do exactly?
We control the camera on the aircraft, we back the pilot up on everything that they do, and we guide the missile into impact.
I wasn't necessarily too patriotic. I was more of the fact of good guys versus bad guys, making decisions and doing the right thing. I decided to get into the Air Force because I was racking up college debt and I didn't know what else to do.
You've said since that you never intended or joined up to kill people. Of course, militaries do tend to get involved in killing people, so that raises a question.
But you can put a number, do you think, to the actual list of targets that you killed, that you took out, or not?
Not really. It's the whole thing is kind of a convoluted list, I guess. I never really paid attention to numbers. I didn't care about numbers.
By the end, how many people do you think you'd killed?
I killed 13 directly with Hellfire missile strikes, and I was party to over 1,600 people being killed in actions directly related to what we participated in.
I killed 13 people with a total of 5 Hellfire missile shots.
In the 4 shots that I took, I killed 13 people.
I took 5 shots, which killed 13 individuals.
After my first 4 shots, I took 3 other shots that were unsuccessful.
And those types of memories are kind of burned into my brain. And but a lot of people that I know in the military, my former colleagues would be like, "That happened so long ago. How come you still remember it?" And
we're just sitting there, and we're like, okay, these guys are obviously bad guys, you know? The guy in the back hears the sonic boom when it reaches him, and he runs forward. We were actually told to get the two guys in front, worry about the guy in the back later, follow him to wherever he goes. Guy in the back runs forward between the two, and we strike all three of them. And the guy that was running forward, when the smoke clears, there's a crater there, he's missing his right leg, and I watched this guy bleed out. And it's clear enough that I watch him, he's grabbing his leg and he's rolling. Like, I can almost see the agony on this guy's face. And eventually, this guy becomes the same color as the ground that he bled upon. The guy that was running from the rear to the front, his left leg had been taken off above the knee, and I watched him bleed out. I watched this guy bleed out, the guy in the back, and his right leg above the knee was severed in the strike. And so when we fired the shot, it was like an L-shaped building, and the person ran from off the screen around into the door, and like, it was a person. Like, I'm not going to say that it was a dog. I was told that it was a dog. And then 6 seconds before missile impact, something runs around the building. When I brought that up, the screener who disseminated video feed said that it was a dog. But I don't think that he ever mentioned a dog the entire evening of them monitoring. I mean, I was pretty much brand spanking new at this. I'd only been doing it a couple months. So who was I to question? I doubt myself at times. Like, maybe I was seeing things, but ultimately I believe there was a child killed.
You're hopefully trying to make sure that you're only getting the target, that other people like just walk up to the person that you're striking. If there's like 6 seconds, you have time to possibly guide the laser away from the people and not kill people that aren't
part of the target.
Yeah, they're not target.
So you see this on the big close-up on your screen. Do you at that moment have the capacity, the ability within the system to divert the missile which has already been launched?
If there was more time, probably, but there was less than 6 seconds left on the clock.
So what did you do?
Maintain target. Like, I asked the pilot what that was, and he's like, it don't matter.
There's about 6 seconds left, and couldn't move, couldn't do anything, and the missile connects, and the building collapses, crumbles, and there's nothing, no little body. I looked at the pilot and asked, like, was that a person? Was that a kid? And he's like, yeah, I think it was.
And I asked the pilot, I was like, was that a kid? And this guy was like, yeah, probably.
A couple months after that, I saw 3 individuals in Mosul, Iraq, driving around, and they were firing a mortar out of the back of this pickup. And illegal combatants that I believe in. As far as I'm concerned, every single strike that I've had is collateral damage. We killed them. The final shot that I took that killed people, we had human intelligence that said that these were 5 individuals were coming through a pass in Pakistan into Afghanistan carrying weapons. And we found them, we waited for them at this pass, and we saw them come through and bed down for the evening. So we had human intelligence and imagery intelligence to confirm it, and we waited for them to go to sleep, and then we killed them. You are the American people. You are this country. Our government is simply in power for a short period of time. They are not the country. The press is not the country. The pulpit is not the country. You are the country.
In 2011 marked the first targeted killing of an American citizen by a US drone.
We decided to fly armed drones over Yemen, and we were going to kill him. And while we were told pretty much every day that this guy was a traitor to the United States, it was brought to my attention while we were doing this that that's a violation of the Constitution of the United States.
And in February of 2011, after 8 months of hunting Anwar al-Awlaki, an American citizen in Yemen, an Islamic imam, I came into work. And my flight operations supervisor was sitting there with his head in his hands. And I went up to him and I was like, "Sir, what's going on?" He said, "We just got an order from the Pentagon. We're going to now fly armed in Yemen. And if we get the order to kill Anwar al-Awlaki, it will come directly from President Obama himself." And I voted this man into office in 2008. And I had this kind of elation, this kind of I was doing my job. They had finally molded me to be what they wanted me to be. I had lost my humanity. And I said, "Well, what's the problem? Leadership says that this man is a traitor. He deserves to die. We are hunting him down for a reason." And he looks at me and he says, "Article 3, Section 2 of the United States Constitution states that even a traitor deserves a fair and free trial in front of a jury of his peers. We are now violating the oath that we swore to defend."
And the pilot that I talked to, he said that in Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution of the United States says that even a traitor deserves a fair and free trial in front of a jury of his peers, and that we were violating the Constitution of the United States by going after this guy in this manner. I have sworn in, I'm a man who was raised on the premise that the only thing that a man has of worth in this world is his word, and if you cannot fulfill your word, then you have no worth. And I swore an oath to defend this Constitution, and they made me break it. They made me break it. They made me break it with this action.
Look at what Brandon says next. He says, "And because I violated that constitutional right, I became an enemy of the American people." Man, that's powerful.
And my grandfather, before he died, told me a couple things. One of the things he said, "The only thing that a man has of any worth in this world is his word, and if you do not fulfill your word, you have no worth." And I can definitely say that I have fulfilled my word in every single aspect of my obligation towards my oath of defending the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
I didn't know what to feel. I just knew that I had ended something that I had no right to end. The second time was horrible. The third time was numbing. The fourth time was numbing. I got kind of lucky in the fact that all of my shots, all of my kills happened within the first 6 months of me being done with training.
So when did you start feeling bad about this program, and why? Why did it start to eat away at your
Because I lost that respect for life.
So you'd become an assassin.
I'd become heartless. I'd become, and it like...
You felt like you were a hitman now.
not necessarily. I just felt like a sociopath, actually, if you want to say that. I wanted to kill these people. These were bad guys. We had a list of their accomplishments underneath them, but instead of being like, man, these guys need to die, but I'm really sad that we have to execute extreme measures, I was like, man, I can't wait for these guys to die.
So I always, actually, when I was in the service, I'd always been critical towards what we were doing. When I was leading, actually, the 3rd Special Operations Squadron, they were giving us awards, and everyone gets to stand up in front of everyone and say a few words, and they wouldn't let me say any words because I would bash them.
And yet you didn't quit at that point. You kept doing it. What made you finally quit? What was it?
One day, it was late 2010, we had a wall that had 5 pictures on it of top Al-Qaeda leaders. And I remember walking in one day, and I kind of stopped and looked at one of these guys, and I was like, man, which one of these motherfuckers is going to die today? And I stopped myself, and I was like, that's not me. But I was living with the fact that I had killed 13 people. And when I had gotten out, I had survived. I had succeeded in surviving the machinations of the industrial military complex, and I was a whole and healthy person who might have this burden on his soul, but I'm going to go forward. I'm going to try to do something good in the world. I was just a soldier. I was just a warrior who had done his job, done his duty as best as he could, and at the very end of my commitment, I realized what we were doing is wrong.
What made you think about what you were doing and eventually decide to stop?
It was accumulation of a lot of things, actually. Mostly that the leadership was lacked quality.
But as soon as everyone's contract gets up, they get out. No one wants to deal with anyone else's bullshit. No one wants to sit there and do this job day in and day out, and our command saying, yeah, continue leaning forward, continue doing the job, you're protecting guys on the ground, you're doing an awesome job, and then our command goes off and they party all the time and they don't even show up to work and they're getting flight pay. There's assholes in my chain of command who are getting flight pay for only flying once every 30 days, and I wasn't getting flight pay, and I was flying every frickin' day of the week.
So all the leadership in our squadron did the minimum amount of flying that they had to, and they were getting paid to do it. They were getting flight extra pay, so they're getting flight pay and stuff. And those of us young airmen didn't have a flying AFSC. We weren't getting flight pay.
But the reason I got out actually originally was because my contract ran. I spent 6 years in active duty military, and my contract was up. And then I decided I wasn't going to re-enlist.
Okay. Now you have PTSD, right?
I've been diagnosed with it, yes.
So why is that? Because people wonder, hey, you weren't in the combat.
There was one kid that I really got mad at. He saw my military ID at Best Buy, of all places, and he was like, yeah, my brother's a Marine and he kills people all the time and he tells me about it. He's got like 36 kills. And I looked at him and I was like, if you ever disrespect the dead like that ever again, I will find you and I will beat you.
The Newsweek article has the details slightly different, claiming Brandon told the kid that he would hunt him and kill him in front of his family. He was asked to leave the store. In the GQ article, the threat becomes stabbing. GQ continues and says that Brandon then went to a therapist where Once he told her that he had wanted to be a hero but didn't feel like one. She diagnosed him with PTSD.
You know, we thought these these drone killings are like a video game, but it obviously is not, because you got post-traumatic stress disorder from sitting at a screen. So what is happening there with you?
So a lot of people misunderstand the whole concept of post-traumatic stress. There's different types. What I have is what some would consider a moral injury. I went directly against my morals and ethics to do something wrong. I wasn't really harmed. I wasn't in danger, but I did something that went against my spirit. And most people that have post-traumatic stress, they were in a high stakes situation where there was explosions and they weren't able to process that information. Well, for me, I was able to process everything that was going on, but I still did it, and it was very confusing.
I kind of kicked everyone in the balls by saying, hey, I've got PTSD.
You're a soldier. You're in a war. Throughout the history of human conflict, those who are combatants witness the most terrible things. So what is so special or different about a drone operator such as yourself having to see the consequences of fighting a war?
Because this type of warfare is the most cowardly type of warfare that there has ever been created.
And again, I spoke with psychologists in the US Air Force they've actually found that PTSD levels among operators, Brandon is a rarity, if you like, in that he has been diagnosed with PTSD. What the Air Force found is that levels of PTSD among drone operators were actually about the same level as the background US population.
Brandon has fashioned himself the leader of a group he calls his Avengers Initiative, a group comprised of individuals making incredible claims, to include Sean Westmoreland, pictured in the upper right, who made the claim as a network computer technician that he developed PTSD by simply hearing a simple phrase.
One day my boss came to me and everybody else, and he handed us a headset, and we were listening to, airplane talking to, it was an A-10 talking to a battle manager, and he smiled and he said, we're killing bad guys now, boys. I was there. I started having nightmares about what I did, hurting children and me trying to help them and not being able to.
What year was this?
It was in 2009.
Having a number of drone clients, and I think, how many people at this table do suffer from PTSD? All of them. All of my drone clients do. Part of the problem has been getting veterans benefits for drone people involved in the drone program who suffer from PTSD because they were not boots on the ground. But this program has left people, all of them, with PTSD. Many of my clients are homeless. Most of them are unemployed. Most of them have dealt with addiction issues, and most of them have dealt with separation or divorce from a loved one. And this is a representative sample. I can tell you I represent many other drone whistleblowers who validate exactly what these guys are brave enough to say to you today. And that is a huge problem, that this program is leaving people in such a state.
That was the first and only real true interaction that I've had with the U.S. government. But I think they've made my life pretty miserable as far as interfering with my veteran administration paperwork and for my physical injuries, not necessarily my PTS. Dealing with the VA, having the VA, Veterans Administration of the United States, dealing with a physical injury as well as a mental injury, and getting them to acknowledge that. I'm still dealing with that.
You are very angry, aren't you?
I am very angry.
Is it partly because you feel damaged? I mean, do you feel a very changed individual as a result of what you've been through over the last 7, 8 years?
Yeah, of course. I lost my innocence. I lost the person that I wanted to be. I no longer dream. I no longer am able to see myself having a very comfortable or enjoyable future. I see my life as a struggle.
See, the weird thing is, you say all this to me and you talk about the damage done to yourself. You have never been anywhere near a real battlefield. Admittedly, you were in Iraq for a few months, but you've never seen war from the point of view of an active battlefield. You've just been looking at video screens.
Yeah, but it still takes, the results of your actions, and it takes a psychological and spiritual toll.
Look, I'm trying to get better. The shit that I'm doing is not working, especially with my physical shit. Like, it's not working. I need help getting better, and I'm not sitting there trying to fucking sponge off the system.
Okay, back on track. Let's do a quick backflip here. Can you still do a backflip, by the way?
I can do a backflip.
Will you do a backflip for us? And then I want to talk about the press.
Okay, yes, I can do a backflip for you.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's incredible. Here, I'll move the dog tether. Now, back in high school, before Facebook and before Snapchat and before Instagram, Brandon here could do a backflip, and it was amazing. You actually had to be there in person to see it, though. You couldn't just videotape him doing a Snapchat, send it to all your friends. You actually had to go to the gym and watch him do a backflip. But now, with the advent of modern technology and live streaming YouTube, we are going to watch Brandon Bryant do a backflip before we talk about the press. Okay. See me? Yeah, you're good.
Thank you.
Awesome.
And they let our politicians take away what we earned. We killed for you. We have died and been maimed for you.
They could kill me if they want to, but when I go back home, I'm homeless. Like, I am a disabled homeless veteran. I have no income. I have nothing. They're not going to take away anything from me that I haven't already lost.
Brandon Bryant is a former drone operator with the U.S. Air Force. Today, Brandon is living in Missoula, Montana, where he attends university and coaches a high school wrestling team.
I got injured in a training accident. I had a 150-pound log crush my spine and had a TBI, and I thought I was going to die.
Brandon Bryant was a drone pilot for 5 years. He's now part of an extreme sports program for veterans.
They could kill me if they want to, but when I go back home, I'm homeless. Like, I am a disabled homeless veteran. I have no income. I have nothing. They're not going to take away anything from me that I haven't already lost. They could kill me if they want to, but when I go back home, I'm homeless. Like, I am a disabled homeless veteran. I have no income. I have nothing. They're not going to take away anything from me that I haven't already lost.
But there's a lot of veterans out there who would be considered worse than I am.
So Brandon, you're very welcome. Thanks for coming on. How are you?
Thank you, Richie. I'm doing all right, I guess.
Well, I know you said to me yesterday, I've got a VA appointment today, and you said I'm going to be a bit late. And
Now you're looking at classes and housing. Relax. The post 9/11 GI Bill can help with more than just tuition. There's also a monthly housing allowance and a supplemental stipend for books, which provides up to $1,000 annually. The post 9/11 GI Bill. It just makes sense.
When I came home, I was sleeping on my mother's couch. I had nothing. Like, I was at the lowest point I'd ever gone. And I basically ran away from home for a month. I spent a lot of time here because I didn't want to sleep under the bridge with the rest of the homeless people or on a bench. But it's close enough that I could walk back from the bars.
I've been traveling with this film and with Brandon for, since April in last year. And we've talked to audiences in Norway and throughout Europe, and most recently in London at the Bertha Duck House.
Hello, my name is Brandon Bryant. I am a former drone sensor operator for the United States Air Force and the receiver of the 2015 Whistleblower of the Year Award. And I am very honored to come to your schools and talk with you.
I just want to say one of the consequences for Brendan about this whole thing is that the last time I saw him, we were in this crazy restaurant in Copenhagen that I think is like the most expensive restaurant in Copenhagen, some 24-course meal that both of us were kind of dumbfounded by. So there's also there's a strange consequences in all directions.
You know, a lot of these people they're just butthurt. Maybe they think that I'm getting profit off of this, which I've never gotten profit off of any of this. I've done this all free of charge.
So explain to me why you are here in this studio.
I'm here to hold my country and the people that I knew accountable for their actions, and myself, really.
And when talking with these kids, I tell them, of course, I always tell them to don't get into debt and take responsibility for their own actions.
I like interacting with kids and teaching kids self-responsibility and that type of deal, because this is why I talk to the Bundestag, is because my country violated their sovereignty, violated their trust. And so informing them allows them to make a decision, allows them to hold my country accountable, which is the people need to hold us accountable for our actions. That's what true friends would do.
I mean, and that's the point where it comes down to, like, humans are completely responsible for their own decisions.
They made me break it. They made me break it. They made me break it.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we end transmission here?
Just, everyone is responsible for themselves. I mean, that's entirely the point.
And each other, and holding each other
Right.
accountable, which is what you're doing.
Right.
I feel like you're trying to hold people accountable for wrongs, wrongs against society.
And that's another,
society as a whole, like a world,
Right.
global,
And that's
in a global
really
sense.
another point too. Is if I have to hold other people accountable, that means I have to hold myself accountable. And the biggest thing is, like, I am holding myself accountable for my own actions.
I directly violated my oath, but when I realized that I had violated my oath by violating the constitutional rights of an American citizen, by hunting him down, I hunted Anwar al-Awlaki for 10 months, and then I got out before he was killed, and then I saw him be killed on the news, and then 6 months and 1 day from my time of getting out of the drone program, Abdullah Rahman al-Awlaki was killed.
Do you think that the killing of Anwar al-Awlaki's 16-year-old son, who is an American citizen, is justifiable?
I'm not going to get into Anwar al-Awlaki's son.
That's an American citizen that's being targeted without due process of law, without trial, and he's underage, he's a minor.
I would suggest that you should have a far more responsible father if they're truly concerned about the well-being of their children.
And I know that it was the same mission that I had been working on previously.
They would, if you brought up any issues about what was happening, they would publicly make fun of you.
How so?
They would call you out during the briefing or whatever, and they'd say something like, "This person doesn't want to do this job." But I only saw that a couple times,
And I've been getting ridiculed.
we get ridiculed.
And then you ridicule us. The people that are speaking out right now, they get ridiculed.
But I felt that it was wrong.
This has been something that I've thought about quite a bit, because I'm unsure of whether or not people care enough in this kind of interactive social media age where people can just share something on Facebook and that's about as much of a protest as you're going to get out of the person.
And I was too scared to say otherwise. Like, I'll admit it, I was scared. I was scared of my command because they would tell us things like, well, if you talk to anyone or go see a psychologist or talk to the IG, you're going to get ridiculed.
My country was founded upon one principle above all else, that you stand up for what you believe in no matter the odds or the consequences.
Stephen Lewis, I wanted to ask you. You made one kill, and then you immediately appealed to your superiors about what you were doing. Could you talk about your experience, who you killed?
It was late 2009.
You're given clearance to fire at the wounded guy on the ground.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what did you do next?
Seriously reevaluated my life. Shortly after that, I ended up writing a very, very convincing letter to my leadership and told them that I didn't belong there. I didn't want to do it anymore, and I wanted out.
And what was their response?
6 months later, I was out of the Air Force.
I was wondering whether at the time that you were a drone operator, did you witness fellow drone operators refusing to execute strikes?
Well, here's a story about a young girl. She's actually, like, her and I have been in a disagreement since I started talking out. Well, she was like, I'm never going to shoot again. You can do whatever you want to me, but if I'm in a position to shoot, I will never take that shot ever again. And then she was like, I'm going to go see a psychologist too. So she was the first. She's actually probably the one of the first people that I knew that actually stood up for herself in the drone world. And so she went and saw a psychologist. I didn't see her for about a month and a half, maybe 2 months.
So you would get a dishonorable discharge if you made the mistake of having enough honor to care about killing innocent civilians.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, welcome to our.
If you question the system, then they would discharge you.
And then she came back and started flying again, and nothing happened. They didn't take her clearance from her. They didn't kick her out. They didn't give her a dishonorable discharge. And that was in middle of 2010, maybe end of 2010. Actually, we're going to go back further to when I was in training. There were 2 people that filed for conscientious objector status, and they were denied, and they were just put in a back room to file paperwork for the rest of their enlistment. And so that was kind of a fear factor too, was if you wanted to get out of the program because you felt uncomfortable, they weren't going to let you go, and you weren't going to get promoted. They were just going to put you away in the back room, and you were just going to be left to rot. And I think that's how they really control most of the members of the drone community, is through fear and intimidation.
You testified in the German parliament, and you said also, you've testified before the United Nations?
Correct.
That you don't know if you might be picked up for war crimes, but you're willing to risk this now.
Correct. I think that it's completely unfair that we helped prosecute
German Nazis in World War II who were just following orders, and we can't put ourselves under that same umbrella. We helped create the current system, the international court system, and we are unable to hold ourselves accountable for our own actions. I think that's completely unfair to the rest of the world.
But what about the legal? Will you be prosecuted, you think?
I don't care. Legalities, man-made law doesn't matter at all.
People aren't going to hold themselves accountable if there's no one to hold them to that.
Think of it, think how you would feel when, if you were part of something that you felt violated the Constitution, and I swore an oath, I swore to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and how do you feel if, like, you can't use "I obeyed orders" as an excuse?
My question is to Bryant. Have you ever considered turning in yourself to the International Criminal Court for war crimes? So, just a sense more, as much as I admire what you speak out and what you do, and suggest somebody else cut the fiber optic cables, I cannot believe you think it's just that if I go out and murder somebody, I go to jail, and you choose to redeem yourself spiritually. So also, don't you think that that would set a very powerful precedent as a US citizen, former drone operator, being indicted for a war crime as in drone strikes?
Actually, I did. I stood in front of the UN. Actually, you saw it in the film, if you watched it. And we had hung out with some of the lawyers previously that were working there, and I had told Sarah Nucky, who was on the council, I said, if you wanted to persecute me, for war crimes, I admit I'm an international war criminal with what I've done. And if someone wanted to persecute me under a criminal tribunal or whatever, I wouldn't stop them. I wouldn't. But she said that it was not necessary because it would just be showboating, and it wouldn't actually get anything accomplished. So I'm doing what I can now to. Like, you said it was unfair that I had found a spiritual redemption.
When I like the idea of helping people and healing people, and the jobs that I wanted to do when I was younger were journalist, teacher, or a pastor, a preacher.
And not done something like that, but that was part of the process, was because like I needed to be punished. I came out in front of the world and said, this is what I had done, punish me. And I was told, hey, thanks for revealing this to us. We're not going to punish you for it. And that actually made me feel worse, if you can believe that. And so I don't even believe in the rule of law, to be honest. I'm more anarchist than anything else the more that I progress through this journey of life. And so I feel like if someone's going to punish me, it's going to be you guys. It's not going to be some bullshit official who has no idea what the hell's going on other than some rules that are made up to keep people in line. When I started doing this, I did it because I wanted people to judge me. I wanted people to see what I had done, and I wanted people to understand that what I had felt and was regret. And I deemed myself to need punishment or need some sort of judgment from the rest of the world. And the only way to fix the problem isn't to stand in front of a judge or a jury and to make an example of myself. What am I going to do if I'm going to be sitting in prison, right? What would I accomplish? I would be able to do nothing. I wouldn't be able to talk. I wouldn't be able to spread any sort of message.
Out of the voice of Jesus himself. Jesus was away shore to teach people how to live, to get their head out of the sand or out of the sky.
Really, after my experience, who's going to punish me worse than myself? Really, who's going to punish me worse than myself? Because I have sat there with a gun in my mouth, ready to pull the trigger, and I couldn't do it. I've realized that's an easy way out. That's too easy. If I'm going to do some sort of a redemption or some sort of atonement
for whatever crime that I've committed, for whatever crime that I've committed, for whatever crime that I've committed, that I believe that I've committed, I need to work on it. I need to be given the opportunity to change things from a physical and mental and spiritual standpoint. I need to be able to set the example.
And I don't believe that any court system is going to punish me worse than I would punish myself.
On the other hand, I wanted to jump to Chantal and ask you, can we imagine a future where Brandon could be prosecuted for war crimes?
I've actually, just before I pass this on, like, I've actually stood in front of the UN and said, you guys can persecute me for war crimes if you want to. And they said it wouldn't be necessary.
Okay, now, this is not an easy question. Let's say that, as I said before, I believe that the targeted killings that are committed, well, through drones or with other methods in contravention to the principles that I said exist, the responsibility of the pilot himself is there, but from my point of view, it's more important to focus on the responsibility of the commanders, of those who gave the orders, of those who planned the unlawful operation. But of course, also the pilot, the individual soldier who shoots, if he realizes, she realizes that the order she received was unlawful, has an obligation to disobey the order. We are not in a gray zone, can amount to war crimes. Someone, even if he was obeying an order, can be held responsible for war crimes because there is a principle nowadays which is recognized over any domestic legislation, is more important than the international law, which is that if you realize that the order that you have been given is unlawful, you have to disobey. Otherwise, you are complicit in it. So this is said shortly.
But then most importantly, it takes working with amazing characters like Brandon.
I think my number one method is, building trust and getting to know the characters of the film.
So when I was talking to the Air Force recruiter, he's like, you know those guys that sit in the operations center for James Bond and gather the intelligence he needs to do his mission? And I was like, yeah, I know those guys, like Q and all them. And he's like, yeah, you'll be one of those guys. And I was like, pretty badass.
I was also told when I was getting in that I'd be like working with specialist teams like James Bond type deal. It was kind of this like fantasy in my head.
I have a very active imagination.
I guess with my mind, with my imagination, you create this story.
I think that it's unfortunate for me that I have a pretty good imagination.
Today we have a very special guest, my friend and former drone operator, Brandon Bryant. Brandon, thanks for being here today. Thank you, Nick. It's a huge honor. Yeah, we went to high school together, right? We went to study hall. That's where we met. Yeah. I was a rule breaker.
I was a rule follower.
You followed the rules.
Yeah.
But we had study hall together.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was we would share books and talk like the Dragonlance book.
The Dragonlance novels. Yeah, we
Yeah.
found a huge thing in common there. Who is your favorite character out of all of them? Who is your favorite?
I mean, of course, I think everyone likes Tasselhoff.
Tasselhoff is awesome.
Yeah, but I liked.
He was the bringer of chaos.
I
love that about him.
Huma, actually.
Huma, yeah.
Yeah, he was probably I'd say that he was probably my favorite.
Huma and Sturm. I like Sturm because Sturm really, dude. He took it upon himself, man.
And who was
it was hard for him.
The Minotaur.
Oh.
Kaz,
yeah.
He was.
Mina's like right hand man.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was pretty badass.
I wanted to be a hero.
And so when we think of stories that we tell ourselves, these are mythologies. But when we think of mythologies, we usually think of gods and monsters, angels and demons, good versus evil, heroes and villains. But what about war? I wanted to be a hero growing up. I wanted to do something good with my life and benefit people.
Could you just express what they symbolize to the audience?
When you get a tattoo on your body, it's kind of permanent, so it has to represent something, right? And so I felt like I needed a symbol on my left that represented war and destruction, and the ultimate symbol of Yang, which is the red dragon, which is the emperor's symbol. But also it represents, from one of my favorite book series called The Wheel of Time, it represents a code of conduct between warriors called Ji'ito, and what it means is honor and obligation. Only a man can know the worth of his own honor and the depth of his own obligation.
The dragon tattoo that Brandon sports on his left arm is the same tattoo worn by the main character in a fantasy novel series with a considerable cult following that extends to the video game world. Randall Thor is widely believed to be a Christ-like figure. He has a wound in his side, he wears a crown of swords, and he is a savior figure who gives his own life to save mankind.
And what I would like people to do is to get them to understand what their interaction with the world really does mean. We might not be looking for a savior or a knight in shining armor to come save us, or maybe that is what we're looking for.
I'm not a unique person. Some people might say that I am, but we've had so many people in our history who have gotten to the point where they've had enough, and they do stand up for what they believe in. If we have these examples in our history, in our mythologies, Prometheus coming down from the mountain to give fire to the people, we have these stories, these myths, these inspirations in our history. How can we do any less?
I wanted to be a hero. This ideal about myself where I wanted to do good, I wanted to save people's lives, I wanted to be a hero.
Okay, so and this is kind of in a way represented a rebirth of who you are, and that rebirth is it connected to kind of defining a new self in contrast to the self before?
Make yourself God, in the 10th chapter of John. And he said, it is written, all of you are gods. He said, I'm no different than you. Everybody's a god. So Jesus is God. I am God. You are God.
I'd already felt damned enough having killed another human being, but they made me feel like a legion of the damned was following me. And they were waiting for me to fail. They're waiting for me in the afterlife.
Angel Perez, having murdered the woman known as Sissy Connors and found guilty of said murder, you are about to die. Do you have any final words?
Yeah, Frex you!
As you know, a small percentage of criminals executed here are chosen for resuscitation and enlistment in the Legion. Do you wish to be considered?
I do.
So I was pretty much alone all the time. And I grew up with books and comic books and heroes and villains.
I have been here for 4 years, and it wasn't until November that anyone else joined me up here, and now I have 6 other operators that are behind my back. Says something.
So in reality, especially with America is supposed to be a republic, right? So each person by himself on his own merit needs to speak out. And just because everyone else thinks that something wrong is something right doesn't make it so. So it's everyone's responsibility that when we think that something's wrong to speak out.
And I always make sure that they understand the fact that they're going to vote for people to represent them in government at some point. And they're the ones that are supposed to take orders from them, not the other way around. Don't let them put fear into you. Don't let the media, don't let the politicians, don't let the religion, don't let anyone else tell them that something wrong is something right.
It doesn't matter what the newspapers say or the politicians or the whole world. They don't define who you are. You do.
You are the American people. You are this country. Our government is simply in power for a short period of time. They are not the country. The press is not the country. The pulpit is not the country. You are the country. You give the orders to everyone that is involved, and you need to take a stand for your own right.
So final words from each of you guys, and then we got to go to the next screen starts.
These are your lives. You are the ones that are responsible for your actions. Our country was founded upon one principle above all else, that we stand up for what we believe in no matter the odds or the consequences.
But we must remember a couple things. Our governments do not represent us in whole. They are not our countries. We're not oligarchies, we're not monarchies, we're not aristocracies, we're not corporatocracies. We are republics. We vote the people that represent us into office. They take orders from us, not the other way around. My country was founded upon one principle above all else, that you stand up for what you believe in no matter the odds or the consequences. It is on individual merit that we must speak. And it is a solemn and weighty responsibility, not lightly to be flung aside at the bowling of the press, pulpit, politicians, or government officials. We are humanity. We are not our governments. Their job is to take orders, not originate them. And so it doesn't matter what the press says. It doesn't matter what the politicians or the mob say. Your job is to plant yourself like a tree beside the river of truth. And when the world tells you to move, you push back and say, no, you move. Thank you.
But there was something about the way that you told your story that impacted me and the rest of our team to the point where we were like, it's so important that Brendan's voice is heard.
As a documentarian, Tonya, is it important to you to tell a story that points to the truth, or to actually make sure you're telling the story in a truthful way? Does that make any sense? I know I saw a quote from Ken Burns recently, and he said, "Yeah, I don't even care if the story's true."
Well, I think that what is great about making a film is that everybody has their own perception of what is true.
And even though the film isn't bringing groundbreaking information, I think that the human stories that we come with, touch people's hearts.
Yeah, this is a question for you, Tonya, as a filmmaker rather than activist. I think it would be fair to say that the film was, or your approach to the film rather, was in places sensationalist, or perhaps that's too strong a word. I'd also be very keen to know what Brandon and Chris think of this as well.
Sensationalist. We should have a talk afterwards. Well, I think that as a documentary filmmaker, it's important for me to make it very clear that this is my subjective view, from the very start. For me, as a filmmaker and as a documentarian, being subjective and showing my argument in what I'm hoping can be a bigger debate. That's my personal approach, which I think is we've passed the idea that documentaries are objective in some ways a long time ago, in my view. So yes.
I've lost friends, I've lost family over this. I've had the US government threaten me and my mother and attack my dog.
You say, well, why do they do that to you? Do you need to ask why they do that to me? They that live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. They shall revile you. They shall say all manner of things falsely against you. They shall do unto them everything that they wish to do, and even kill you, thinking they do God a service. And if you're not getting persecution, you're not living godly. So I have my credentials. What about you?
Reach out, touch faith.